Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Alexi Melvin, and you are listening to the Theater Podcast with Alan Seals.
Welcome to the Theater Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and this is an all-new episode featuring queer TikTok expert and Broadway producer Alexi Melvin. Coming from a professional sports family, she still found her calling on the stage and just recently embraced a love for producing, Broadway producing, with all of her projects somehow coming to fruition this past 2023-24 Tony Awards season. So that is, of course, a fun story. Also going by she, they pronouns, we dive into a very good conversation about her own self-exploration, sexual preference versus sexual identity, and a few other nuggets of wisdom that come along with this subject matter. So now I'll cut to the chase. Find me online on the socials and give a little follow or like, leave a rating or a review wherever you're listening to the podcast now. Check out my Patreon page for video versions of the episodes. And now everyone, please enjoy this episode with Alexi Melvin.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest is a multi-Tony Award nominated Broadway producer for her work on Illinois and, of course, contributing to The Outsiders. And she has also done work with on the producing teams of Here Lies Love and The Notebook. A writer and actor who takes the term multi-hyphenate to an all-new level. She is a proud member of and advocate for the LGBTQ plus community and is deeply involved with type 1 diabetes organizations such as JDRF and Beyond Type 1. She has notable voice work in Star Wars Rogue One. I can't even say it right. Star Wars Rogue One and Star Wars The Last Jedi, and on-screen appearances in Time Out of Mind and Quarter, and a significant presence as an LGBTQ plus creator, say that 5 times fast, on TikTok with, just about across that 100,000K followers. Oh, geez, I need more coffee. Let's just get to it. Alexi Melvin, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. Thank you for doing this early. Definitely need more coffee. But
Same.
all of the producing credits, and I think this gets back to the timing because of COVID. Everything just sort of landed right now. So
yes,
was that intentional, or were you just one day you're like, I'm tired of being super popular on social media. I'm going to start doing something else.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this really did all happen in 1 year, which is crazy to think about. I came to New York right out of high school. I had been here for, 10 plus years, and then, decided to take a break and go to LA, the Bay Area, whatever. And then kind of COVID hit, and I was, with my mom in Arizona, and, things were crazy and everybody was questioning who they were and what they wanted to do. And, and I just, I always knew I wanted to be a storyteller. And I was just at that place where I was like you said, kind of just creating stuff on TikTok, which is fun, but it's like, what's next? And, I was talking to a family friend who was actually the son of Carol Shorenstein-Hayes, who's another epic, producer. And we'd known each other. He and I had known each other since we were, kids. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I just want to be a part of whatever's next, in entertainment, whether it be film, ideally theater. I had never really had the chance to make my mark in musical theater as I had wanted to as a kid. And he was like, okay, well, let me think. He said, Clint Ramos is about to, dive into Here Lies Love. They're renovating this theater. It's going to be insane. Why don't you just talk to him? And I was like, okay, sure. Icon, whatever. I flew out to New York. I hadn't been back here since the pandemic. And, we had a meeting. He kind of showed me what was going on with Here Lies Love. And I thought he was just going to give me advice, but he was like, I think you would be really amazing for this show, based on, your goals as a storyteller. And I was like, I don't really know how to produce. I would love to learn. He was like, let's see what happens. So yeah, I made it happen, and it was my first co-producing credit. And it really just went from there. I mean, I was so fortunate to have made the connections that I did and the friends that I did, and it all just happened really organically. And, you know, I feel like that doesn't happen very often, you know, where it just feels like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And it felt not easy. Like, you know, producing is not easy, but it felt natural. Yeah. And that's just kind of how it all kicked off.
Well, there's, I think, to be involved with producing in general in Broadway, you have to be in love with the arts. You have to be in love, like you said, with storytelling, because what was it? It was like Moulin Rouge has been out for how long, and they just recouped? Or I mean, so to get as an investor, like everything takes money to happen, and so there are multiple levels. And saying you're a producer on something is, depending on where you come in and how you're involved, you can either like be giving the money or raising the money or both, or part of the creative team that is actually making the decisions. And sometimes people who give the money get that privilege because of the money they give. I mean, it's just so nebulous.
Yes.
And hard to understand. So it's very interesting that, you know, Clint was just like, yeah, let's do this. Let's take a chance. And I think he probably saw in you what I suspect is this passion for storytelling and this passion for bringing these stories to the stage, and just wanted to help nurture that, because we need so much of that right now.
Yeah, exactly. And he is definitely one of those people. And I think we sensed that in each other right away. And, you know, like you said, there's just so many ways to come into producing, and so many, you know, every producer really has their strength. And I think, you know, to make a show work, there has to be a good balance of producers. You know, for me, it's like I'm always battling with this storyteller artist side of my brain, and then the sort of practical, you know, side where I'm like, okay, is this smart? Is this going to make money? You know, for all the reasons we hate as, you know, artists, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it really is a balance. And yeah, I'm grateful that he was kind of the person that I first linked up with.
It's funny you use the term balance. I was going to like say, yeah, it feels, there are decisions you make that will fill your creative bucket, but not your bank account bucket, but your literal balance.
Yes. Literal balance, exactly.
Your literal bank account balance. But then, like, getting on The Outsiders too, you were working under the mentorship of LaShawne's. So, like, how do you just...
Yeah.
LaShawne's is, of course, legendary, and she's been great, like, pivoting into the producing side of life too. Yeah,
that's the thing. I've been so lucky to sort of just run right into these people who happen to believe in me. And, you know, she's been on a similar journey. You know, she... last season, just no big deal, got 2 Tonys right off the bat in producing, and she's been an inspiration of mine just as a performer for, you know, however long, since I was a kid. We connected on that level, and I think we have a lot of similar tastes as far as projects, and her enthusiasm is infectious. And I think it's a really exciting time for artists in general this season that are like, you know what, yeah, okay, I might have started out as an actor, I might have started out as this or that, but it's like, that's not all that's there, you know? Again, it goes back to this passion of just storytelling. And, you know, we connected on that, and she had The Outsiders coming up, and she was like, you know, I'd love to just sort of have you on board with this in whatever capacity makes sense. And yeah, and I've been really privileged to be able to watch her grow as well as a producer, and she's taken off. She just started her own production company, so you know, it's wild.
Yeah, I love all of that, and it seems to be, I don't know, was this a trend that Tom Cruise started like a decade ago of producing? I mean, you see everybody on TV and film now executive producing their own stuff, and it obviously, Broadway being slow to adopt change and new technology, is it just trickled down now where actors are like, oh yeah, Broadway actors are like, oh yeah, I could do that too, and start executive producing their own work, you know, so they believe in it, they're more passionate about it. Have you seen that sort of in your travels, or is this all still a little bit new?
It's still a little bit new, but I mean, just, Kristen Chenoweth is producing Queen of Versailles now.
Yes.
And she's,
Yes.
and she's so smart. I've had the opportunity to, speak with her about it as well. And she's, it's amazing. It's really amazing how intelligent, these performers are that, they've been doing this one thing their whole lives, but it's like they gain this understanding, this deep understanding of the business that you don't quite expect. And you're like, oh my gosh, and you want to be a part of what they're doing.
Right.
But yeah, it is exciting. I think it's fairly, it's fairly new, but it's really cool to watch.
Well, so it's fairly new. I mean, okay, you mentioned as a kid, and I want to cover this because I think it's important to define where you are now in your life. But
Right.
Tell me about your childhood, because you have a very strong sports influence,
Yeah.
Major League Baseball influence as in your childhood, which would not, in my mind, lead you to want to produce Broadway.
No.
So I want to hear that story.
Well, my dad has been in Major League Baseball since before I was born. He started out playing. He played for all kinds of teams, the Giants, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Royals, I don't even know, I lost track. He started coaching and then managing. He's the current manager of the San Francisco Giants. Before that, it was the Padres and the Oakland A's and several other teams. But
Bob Melvin, yes.
Bob Melvin, this is
For those keeping track at home.
Yes. And he, I never was into sports, ever. I mean, I obviously grew up supporting him and I would go to games when, but it just never clicked. It was just never my thing. The one thing I did like about it was like the big playoff games and stuff, because there was like theatrics and there was, it was like a production, like surprise, surprise. That's what that was the, selling point for me. But he was always kind of like a pillar of success. Like you really can't get more successful than he is with his job. That was a big thing for me growing up, because clearly I couldn't follow in his footsteps unless I wanted to, play softball or whatever. I didn't. I never played any sport, but yeah, it was a lot of pressure in a way, because the arts, there's no, with baseball, you start with little league and you just go from there, like that. It's one track essentially. And there's not many different forks in the road there. It's like, yeah, you're just off to the races. And meanwhile, with the arts, it's like, how many different ways can that go? So I think for me, it was a little bit of pressure, as well as him kind of watching me going, what's that going to look like? But he was always, he was supportive, but he also wanted me to have real jobs here and there, which I obviously did and still do. But yeah, just, ways to pay for things and learn discipline, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was, he was always a role model, even if it was wildly different fields.
Pun intended.
Pun intended. But yeah, now he's really excited about where I am in my producing career. I don't think he really expected it, because I started out, acting and all that, but he's really excited. He really is. He comes to all the shows that I'm involved with, and he talks about them in press conferences and stuff. And yeah, he's like my biggest cheerleader.
That's so cool. That's cool that he allowed you to kind of find your own path. And I think that's the mark of any good parent, is you just support what makes your children passionate.
Yeah. Right?
Because if you try to pigeonhole you into something else, then you're not going to want to do it. Your heart's not into it. Right.
Exactly. And my mom was a huge part of that as well. She started taking me to theater and ballet and, museums. And, she really wanted to instill art in me. And it worked. She took me to Phantom of the Opera when I was 3, because I would not stop listening to I think it was the cassette tape at that point.
Yeah.
That'll age me. But yeah, I had it memorized when I was 3. I would run around singing Phantom, and she's like, oh, okay, there's something here. So she had a big role in that. Yeah. And then my dad was kind of the practical side of it. Like I said, making sure I learned, not to quit on things, because in the arts, you want to just oh, maybe I'll try that. That didn't work. Maybe I'll try that. He's like, stick to what you're, stick with something, and I did, but yeah, my parents were great.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the episode. Thinking back, was there ever any moment when you were trying to decide, what you want to do when you grow up? We'll put grow up in air quotes because I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
No.
And when you were just considering anything other than performing, acting, did you want to be a singer, a dancer, or anything in tech? Was there any point where you're like, I'm going to try something else?
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 14, and I was always really, really passionate about advocating for the disease, and I've been involved with several organizations, and I thought, I actually did work for a couple of nonprofits, and I thought, because it's a very different kind of passion, but I thought like, hey, maybe I could just do this. I could be like a voice for this community, and quickly realized that my love for the arts was too strong to just have that be the thing.
Too strong.
It's just too strong. I couldn't fight it. But luckily I found a balance, and now I can kind of do both. But I would say that's the only thing that, like, apart from the arts, that kind of piqued my interest. But when I was little, I thought I would be a musical theater performer. But I realized I didn't really have that in me. I've done film acting and voice work, and I can do that. But good Lord, I could never.
The 8-show a week schedule, it's intense.
No, I just can't. And most of my favorite people are theater performers, and I love them to death, and they're my heroes, but absolutely not.
Yeah. No, I say it all the time. Broadway is the Olympics of theater. It's the best of the best, the top of the top of the echelon, whatever you want to say. And to maintain that, it's mental, it's physical, and it's everything in between.
Yeah.
Because you can't go out, especially, maybe in your 20s. In your 20s, you can do whatever you want, and your body's normally fine. What about the queer side of life? Because that, like, you're very vocal about your own identity, and you use she, they pronouns, and like this whole self-discovery that you went through. Like, kind of walk me through that and how it led you to which eventually, I guess now is what you decided to really talk about on social media. But was this recent? Was this when you were a kid? Like, also parents have an influence over this sort of journey as well. Right.
Yeah. I've always known, it's childhood memories. I can remember being infatuated with women. That was just always a thing. And I remember watching like Olivia Newton-John in Grease and being like, wow, but of course when you're that young, you don't know. I think what I tell people is that my aha moments, like my queer awakening, was Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. I was 13, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, it all makes sense now. So yeah, from there, it's funny. I never really had a coming out. I just kind of realized it and just lived my life. I remember telling my mom like how I was feeling, and she was very accepting of it. And same with my dad. They were just like, okay, that's what that is. Didn't date a lot in high school, because I was still figuring it out. But there was like these very like early video blog things on a website called afterellen.com back then when I was like 18, like 18, 19. And that was like new territory, like that, TikTok wasn't around. I don't even think Instagram wasn't even around. So it was kind of, I got in with this kind of very early community of queer women. And I still know a lot of them to this day, which is hilarious. But that was kind of my first entry into like having a voice about it. And I was very kind of shy and awkward back then, and they still kind of let me do my thing anyway, which was, very sweet because it was awful. But, fast forward through college and all that, TikTok, that was definitely a thing, especially over the pandemic. And I think like a lot of people, I thought it was just for kids, and it was like the dance videos and it was whatever. And I remember one of my friends being like, there's like lesbian TikTok. And I was like, And she was like, yeah, you might want to check that out. And it was just these like amazing, stunning, powerful, sometimes comedic, whatever, just like lesbians just kind of doing their thing. And I was like, yeah, let me try this. So it was definitely a way during the pandemic to create on my own terms. And, being an actor and it was fun for me to kind of lean into my comedic chops and create content that was relatable. And it just took off. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it was like this little, again, kind of like the AfterEllen.com thing. It was this little hub of like queer women that, and you kind of like started interacting with the people that were like at the same level as you follower wise. And then like, I don't know, it was just fun. And I still do it to this day. And I've used TikTok to, talk about the shows that I'm involved with and kind of that intersection of Broadway and queer people, which is my favorite thing. But yeah, and it's, now it's helpful in the sense that I want there to be more space for queer stories on Broadway.
Absolutely.
And I want them to work, and I think with any marginalized community, it's like, especially in a space like Broadway, what's the code? How do you crack the code of making that story universal and welcoming everybody into it, And I think that's the code we haven't quite cracked yet, unfortunately. But stories like Illinois, I think, does it so beautifully because it really does. It's just a story. It's just a love story, and it doesn't try to be anything else. It just is. Mm-hmm. And I have a really good memory actually of my dad seeing it recently, and I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's a queer kind of love triangle and relationship, and I won't say which characters, but they're two male characters, and he said, I'm really glad he ended up with him. And I was like, like my dad is just this like, sports guy, he didn't grow up very, liberal. And yet he's like watching this very human story going, oh, I'm really glad those two guys ended up together. It was just so sweet and impactful for me.
I absolutely agree. And I go back to the stories that I was told, similarly to recently I did the Outsiders takeover, with a bunch of casting creatives from Outsiders. Years and years ago, I did a same thing. I do takeovers a lot. And I did it with the Prom, and I think it was Caitlin and Izzy were telling me that they would get just, especially, where was their out of town? It was in Atlanta, I want to say, if memory serves. So. And it was somewhere down south. And they had somebody very specifically, they said, came up and was like, if I knew what this show was about, I would never have seen it. But now that I've seen it, I am so glad I did. And it has made me see things in such a different way because you're able to humanize. I mean, you're in your own echo chamber. That's just how we are as people. Right. For most of us, the algorithms on social media, talk about social media, serve us the content we want to see because their goal is to keep us on the platform longer to serve us more ads. So they keep us in our own little happy place as long as they can, giving us the same crap that we want to see without being open-minded, whatever. This is my own little soapbox I get on.
No, please.
But it's so interesting to me that theater still can bring people together and allow you to experience other people's stories in a way that no other medium can.
Right.
Like live theater, hearing the person next to you crying because it touches them in a way that you didn't initially think about. I watched a documentary on Liza Minnelli last night. It premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. And the woman next to me was just sobbing during the part where she was talking about living under her mother, Judy Garland, living under her mother's thumb until her mother died. So it's this bittersweet moment of Liza didn't become Liza until her mother died, and she was allowed to find out who she really was. Where was I going with this story? Oh, yeah. So that got me thinking in the moment, like why did this particular aspect of Liza's story affect the woman sitting next to me so much? And it got me thinking, and I started evaluating my own relationships with my parents,
Right.
like all the stuff happening in real time in the moment. I absolutely love how it brings people together in a way that you just can't get in any other scenario.
Totally agree. And I hope that there's more, the progress has not remotely been fast enough in terms of like the longevity of these shows that do that. But hopefully we're getting there. And shows like Here Lies Love, like that it did not have the life that it deserved, but the impact it had, on both the Filipino community, but also just anybody who walked into that space and was like, wow, this is an actual like revolution. It's doing something that has never been done. It's, watching people be affected in that way is really special. And it gives me hope, and it motivates me to stick with all of this, which sometimes,
How do you choose what you do get involved with? Because Illinois, The Outsiders, The Notebook, Here Lies Love are all very different stories.
They are. I like to say that I want to champion shows that are pushing Broadway forward in some way. Because like I said, I think there needs to be more space, and there needs to be more variety, and while still honoring the foundations of Broadway. I am drawn to shows that are pushing it forward, whether it be thematically or within the story or within, the design of Here Lies Love, David Corins, shout out,
Just phenomenal. Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. But yeah, that's...
And talk about David Corins, like the Who's Tommy as well. God, I love that. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
no, seriously. Yeah. I'm happy to fangirl over all these people. So that's my motivation. And again, going back to the, having a voice for marginalized communities is really important to me. And just being a part of those stories being told in ways that they deserve.
I love that. That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
And as long as it pushes the boundaries, and I think that's what good theater should do. You need a story that's going to hook people, but overall it's gotta push the boundaries. And think about all of the shows that have changed the landscape, right? And Hamilton being one of the most recent that just said, "Oh shit, rap and R&B can work on Broadway."
Correct.
And then go back before that, and it was Rent, and oh shit, rock and roll can work on Broadway.
Yep.
In Pop Singers. And then you go back before that, and you've got Oklahoma, and I mean, like, there are these milestones that seemingly now have become now at this point in our life we're like, oh yeah, it's just always been there, but that's not true. That's not the case.
No.
They were huge risks at the time.
Yep.
Huge.
Yeah. So I like to, go back and look at these shows and be like, what worked? How did they do that? And how is that going to translate to the next thing? And yeah, I wish there was an exact formula, but there's just not.
No.
And it's fascinating and also infuriating. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
You know what? Okay, so now with social media, we keep going back to social media because it's ruling our life and destroying our ability to make eye contact and have normal conversations. But that's another soapbox. Okay, get off my lawn. I feel like an old man right now. I think that's part of what I love so much about The Outsiders specifically is the way that the marketing team, and this is the business of show business right here.
Correct.
Is the marketing team is marketing all the guys as a boy band essentially. Like, look at all the pictures, they're all together and they're cute and they're loving on each other and they do truly love each other as people, and the marketing team is capturing that.
Right.
And doing and like they're all blowing up on TikTok and they're showing their slow motion videos of coming off after the rumble all wet, and you're like, oh, look at my abs, it stinks, I'm so sexy right now. Like they're doing such a great job with this. So they're marketing the behind the scenes and the people as much as the story, because the story itself stands alone, but then to get word of mouth on social media with the younger generation that is going to become tomorrow's change makers, they're doing such a good job.
Yeah, listen, we're all just fangirls, at our core. And like,
count me in.
Honestly, like I that's my sort of job title overall. Like producing whatever TikTok. I'm just a fangirl, and I love it. And like that kind of marketing, I think really is in that way very smart, because we're like, oh, we just want to like, we want to be
Gets you to notice.
Yeah, and we want to know these people, and we want to feel like we have sort of an inside eye into what, I think that's what really works in marketing, and I try to impart that in my producing world as well, as like, if the social media team will have me, I'm always kind of like, hey, I think this would work, like because like everybody wants to know the cast, everybody wants to just see what they do behind the scenes, and like, because they're charming and charismatic, and we love them. So yeah, shows like The Outsiders really have a lock on that.
Mm-hmm. And then The Notebook plays into nostalgia, and I love the color conscious casting of just representing that love is love is love, to quote Lin-Manuel, right? It doesn't matter what you look like. Everybody deserves and needs love. Yeah. And Illinois being featuring a queer story, I think that is so wonderful. And like to your point, there's not enough queer representation. It's a shame. It's just, I don't know if this is a byproduct of an overcrowded season. Lempicka closed too early.
Don't get me started.
Right? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the episode. I think at a backing up at a higher level though, and this is my business hat on, I think there should be more regulation and partnership with the city of New York, which, by the way, Broadway brings in $2 billion with a B dollars of tourism. At least before COVID, it did. I don't know if it's back to that now.
Right.
But when COVID shut down the city, was like, okay, whatever. And then now everyone's coming back, and it's so crowded. And then these great, amazing shows like Lempicka just get overshadowed by the bigger budget musicals that do have the bigger budget to market. And like Lempicka, again, was a risk. And when you have a traditional demographic of people who are your traditional people who are able to afford the tickets of Broadway, which is another problem, which is another issue that the city, I think, needs to get involved with and have subsidies. And I don't know. Don't get me started on that. Man, so many soapboxes with you.
I mean, I'm sorry I triggered this in you, but I'm not sorry, because I agree.
No, yeah, like tickets are too expensive to get the people who truly need to see theater to know they belong, not feel like they belong, but know they belong.
Yeah.
Right? They can't. There needs to be more lotteries or whatever the case is. And I know producers want to do that, but they can't, because if they start giving away and lowering tickets like that, they can't exist.
Right.
So, because the cost of production is so damn high.
Right. And it just goes back to that balance, and I am guilty of forgetting about the tourists a lot. I'm like, oh yeah. Like there's just the tourists that want to see the big flashy things. Yeah. And that's important, I guess. But again, it goes back to the marketing of like, how do we do that, but with the shows that really deserve to be seen as well, like these really artistic, brave shows like Here Lies Love and Lempicka.
Why can't the Broadway League do a buy one get half off sort of thing? If you're coming in and it's like, I'm a tourist, I don't speak English, I want to see Back to the Future because I've heard of that as a movie. I'm going to go see Back to the Future, and then I can get half off of Here Lies Love or half off of The Outsiders or something. Like, sure, why not?
Right, exactly.
Just start doing some subsidies. I don't know. Broadway League, you listening? You reach out. I got ideas.
I think you should apply.
I'm gonna apply. Taking applications.
Yeah, exactly.
I could be Eric Adams' personal Broadway liaison. I'll butt heads with Mayor Adams right now.
Right. Have at it.
Yeah, I will. I would love to sit down with that man. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. I think there is an ability to change. I so respect that you're trying to be that change, because the producers are literally putting your money where your mouth is. The producers are they need to invest in what they want to see.
Right.
And you are doing that.
Yes.
And I absolutely love how important that is to you, and using your platform, your voice, to bring people in. Have you had? I guess what kind of feedback are you getting from your social media posts, from the conversations you're having now, being involved with everything this season? It seems everything for you has come to this season is open. But yeah, like, how are you experiencing it the past year? Because everything has just been moving so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, as far as my audience, it still sounds so weird to say that. I'm like, I have an audience. It's been great. I was a little afraid to kind of like transition from like purely like queer relatable content to here's what I'm doing on, in theater. Mm-hmm. And they were, really receptive. Again, it goes back to being a fangirl, because like lesbians in particular, we're just simps. Like we're just a bunch of simps. And so if there are these like fabulous performers and creatives and people involved that we can champion, like I've learned that they will jump right on board with that. So it's been great. And one in particular, they love Kristen Chenoweth. Like, of course, lesbians love Kristen. So I started like creating some content about Kristen, particularly that bathtub photo of her and Adina. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
That one went off. So as long as I infuse things like that, they're happy. But overall, they're also just very, very supportive of all of my shows, especially the ones that, Illinois with the queer themes and things like that. But there's always a way, there's always a way to get their attention. But yeah, Kristen will laugh if she listens to this, because she knows. she watches my stuff.
That's funny. And something I respect about your channel as well is that you're very content focused. You're very, literally the thumbnails are all somewhat similar, and people watch it because they know you have a lot of really good stuff to say, and it's not thirst traps. It's not,
trying. No.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was in the beginning. I was like, oh, that's what lesbian TikTok is. It's just the thirst traps. And I'm like, no, that is not remotely who I am. I am awkward. I am self-deprecating. That is just, that's who I am. And if it's going to work, it's going to work. If not, I'm never doing a thirst trap in my life. But, yeah.
Well, good for you. And I mean, you speak to what you love, and there are other people who want to hear from you, and you lean into it. I think it's great. And it's a level of putting yourself out there that ironically I still haven't been able to do. So I greatly respect that. Like, I don't know how to sit in front of a camera and just talk to myself on camera.
Okay, so you need other people to bounce off of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like literally what we're doing right now. I want to look you in your digital eye. We're on a remote recording session.
Right.
And like my serotonin release is happening because I've been staring at your face the whole time, and like that makes me feel good. And I don't get that looking at myself. I don't know. It's just not for me.
Got it. It might be like the film kind of nerd in me too, because you can edit and you can, yes, it is sometimes just talking into the camera, but you definitely have, it's on your terms,
Yeah.
And yeah, I understand that though. You should play with it.
I should. And okay, maybe I'll just start thinking. It's just one of those things where I'm a people pleaser, and I don't want to say something that people don't like. And I'm like,
oh, that's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And gosh, I mean, the internet is full of trolls and hate. And it's like, do I want to open myself up to that, or do I just do it and not read any comments?
Right. I mean, the algorithm can be a blessing and a curse. I think it does. The support that you'll find within, the community that finds you, I think definitely far outweighs any of the trolls.
Yeah, I get that. All right, so I want to touch on real quick, and if we may go here for a second, the use of pronouns, because gender identity is completely different from sexual preference. Mm-hmm. And at what point in your life were you like, she, they? I mean, I talked to somebody the other day that was like, literally call me any pronoun you want as long as you're respectful. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I resonate with that, actually. It's all about respect, and it can be so ever evolving. For me, it was, at one point I was they, them, And then I realized I was a little more tapped into my divine feminine than felt right to be, to request of people to call me that. So it's definitely just an evolving thing. And, at some point I landed on she, they because it just felt right. Like I've always felt very androgynous in my spirit. And for me, that's kind of what drives me in terms of my pronouns. But it's just it's so unique to everybody. And it's so important to create a safe environment for people to learn and explore both themselves and each other. It's a beautiful time, but it's still challenging.
So do body parts at all influence that decision? Because I've heard both people go to both sides of that argument, where they don't care what their genitalia is, they just want to present as a man or present as a woman,
Right.
by traditional sense or whatever. Or some people, there's a good lesbian friend of mine who's like, I love the chest of a man, but you get below the waist and I'm out. And then somebody else made the argument that that's homophobic or transphobic.
Right.
And then, so we had an actual really good conversation about that sort of thing. So it's always interesting to me, like, does it matter? Does it not? And again, and you use terms like energy and spirit, feminine energy, feminine spirit. And to me, and again, so to me, that implies that physical, what you have hanging or dangling doesn't ultimately matter.
Yeah. Again, it's just such a unique thing to everybody. It's such a unique feeling, decision, energy. I've battled with it some, like feeling like an androgynous human, but also having this body is confusing sometimes. And it's like, I've sometimes thought, like, do I do something about it, or do I just embrace what I was given while also projecting who I am, And again, it's just so different. It's so different. I have many trans friends who thought, no, this is, I have to do the whole shebang. And some people who are somewhere in the middle, and some people who don't care. So it's just, again, it's just, for your friends and loved ones and yourself, just being really, really gentle, gentle with yourself and easy on yourself, so that you have this safe space to find what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And the safe space includes, I think, surrounding yourself with people who also accept you, and ultimately it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
there's love, there's physical love, and there's emotional love. And I think they are very different.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and that's also why I love my Broadway community, because there's so much support, both career-wise and personally. And, again, it just goes back to, we need more of these stories on stage and on film to provide more of that safe environment. So again, just full circle. That's why I'm here,
Oh, I love it. All right. So wrapping up, I guess if you listen to past episodes, we do a little plot in 60 seconds. Are you ready for this?
No. Okay. Yes.
All right. So give me a number between 1 and I have 13 popular musicals. So the number you give me will correspond to a musical on my list. I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock here. All right. Up on the screen. Okay. So give me your number.
So anxious. 7.
Ironically, that corresponds to Phantom. Go.
60
Oh,
seconds
shit. Okay.
remaining.
Yes. Incredible young woman who is much more of a badass than she gives herself credit for. Kind of, reclusive, arguably creepy dude, but really just a simp. Decides that he's
45
going to make
seconds
her a
remaining.
star. They have like a really kind of dysfunctional relationship. But ultimately, I'm gonna pin it on Madame Giry. I think she was actually the villain of all this, and it doesn't end up well. We don't know what happens to him, but it ends up fine for her. She gets sort of like the pretty bi guy, in my opinion, and they're all fine. The chandelier is not fine, but they'll be okay.
15 seconds remaining.
Yeah. Chandelier R.I.P.
R.I.P.
All right, P Chandelier. All right, I might invest in that. All right, I'll take that one.
I mean, I would, yeah.
I'll take that one. Okay, so then our normal wrap up here now. 3 standard closing questions. The first one, very simply, is just what motivates you.
What motivates me is stories that deserve to be told.
What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
I would say to not shy away from doing what you're a fan of.
All right. I like it. It's very simple and very straight point. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Here Lies Love. I gotta go with Here Lies Love.
I love that show. It was so unique. It was so unique, and depending on where you sit or stand, you get a different experience every time. I love it.
It really is.
I love it. Oh, plus it's live theater. You always get a different experience every time.
True
All
story.
right, so where can we find you online? We've talked about social media so much.
Oh, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram. What are my handles? TikTok is, I think, yes, The Only Lex. And then Instagram is the Alexi James, which is my acting name. I need to change that. But currently that is where you can find me.
Alexi James.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's my stage name.
I always thought I would do 3 names when I joined, because that was the joint equity. That was the fad at the time.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing.
The 3-name thing, but
yeah.
No, I never did. All right, I am on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm nowhere cool as far as cool as Alexi is, but I'm there. And you stop. Leave a rating, review, share the podcast, spread the word, help get representation onto Broadway. Thanks to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music, and Alexi, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.